Lesson 44 is titled Leftbound Reports. We've talked about unbound reports. Unbound reports are simple reports that don't have a permanent binding along the left edge of the paper or the top edge of the paper. For example, your textbook for this course is a top-bound report because it has the binding at the top of the book. So it can be considered a top-bound report. Most books are bound on the left side and are considered to be left-bound reports. Now, whenever you type a report for your boss or for the board of directors or for potential customers or for the whatever, if you have a very long multi-page report that will be included in a binding of some kind, whether it's professionally done or whether you punch holes in it and create your own little notebooks, you have to consider that it is now being bound and that the report page needs to be changed a little bit. On page 297 in your textbook, it explains to you about the margins of the page and how the left margin of a left-bound report needs to be different than an unbound left margin. All right, if this is our left-bound report, let's just say this is the first page of our left-bound report. Get off of there. Okay. We start with an unbound report because the unbound report margins are 1 inch all the way around. Here's the right margin of 1 inch. Here's the left margin 1 inch. Here's the top margin of the page 1 inch. Here's the bottom margin of the page and it's 1 inch also. But if we start putting this report into some kind of a binder, and when we open that report, a lot of these words on the left side of the page are going to get sucked into that crease that you open the book when you open the book. So we have to enlarge the size of this margin, the left margin, so the words are pushed over away from the margin. So when you open that book, the words are more easily seen. So when you have a left-bound report, you have to remember to change the left margin. Now, the only way you'll know that you're going to have a left-bound report is if the boss tells you, if the instructions in the book tell you, or if the instructions on the test tell you, or if you've known the person you're working with forever and you know that the process is this when you do this. If you need to have a left-bound report, you don't need to be told all the time. You just learn it in the process of working with those people. But instructions will always tell you to make a left-bound report. So on page 297, margins are the distance between the edge of the paper and the text in the document. So here's the edge of the paper, here's the text. So the area between the two is a margin. This is the left margin. Over here, it's the right margin. Up here, it's the top margin, and down here, it's the bottom margin. Now, most of the time your titles are going to be about 2 inches from the top of the page, but do not ever create a different top margin on any document that you do in this class unless the instructions tell you to, because for the most part top margins are never changed. Yes, this title needs to be at about 2 inches. If you create a 2-inch top margin and this document runs into pages 3 and 4 and 5, then every one of those pages will have a 2-inch top margin if you create a 2-inch or set a 2-inch top margin. So don't do a top margin. The only margin that you need to change for any document is the left margin if you are going to create a left-bound report. The default margins in our settings are 1 inch. Top and bottom and right and left margins are all 1 inch. But if you want to fit more information on a page, you can make the margins more narrow. For example, this is already default settings, and the margins setting is listed in the Layout tab at the top of the Word screen. All the way over here on the left, there's a Margins button, and you have some options. The last custom setting, the normal margins, which are already set because you can see the gray square around them and it tells you that each one of them is 1 inch. You can go to narrow margins, which are 1/2 inch all the way around, and I can click that right now and you can see the difference in the way the page looks, the way the text is laying on the page. The margins are very narrow now. I can also go to moderate margins, which leaves the top and the bottom at 1 inch, but the left and the right are 3/4 of an inch. Let's see what that looks like. That's a little bit bigger than narrow, but it's not quite as big as the default 1 inch margins. Let's go up here to margins again. Wide margins. The top is 1 inch, the bottom is 1 inch, but the left margin is 2 inches and the right margin is 2 inches. Let's see what that looks like. Aha! That pushes all the text into the middle of the page with a lot of white space on either side of all the paragraphs. And then your other options are mirrored margins for if you have a book layout, and then going back to the Office 2003 defaults, which were 1 1/4 inch margins on the left and the right side. And then you can do custom margins by typing in whatever measurement you want on the dialog box. Now, I'm going to go back and put this at normal. Everything's 1 inch. There's our 1 inch margins again. Whenever we have a left-bound report, we have to move the text over toward the center of the page a little bit so that the binding won't get caught. The words won't get caught in the binding. So the rule is if you need a left-bound report, you change the left margin to 1.5 inches. So we go to, the cursor can be anywhere on the document. It does not matter where. If it's a 10-page document, it doesn't matter where the cursor is. You just have to have the document open and the cursor has to be on the document somewhere. Go to the Margins button on the Layout tab and choose Custom Margins. And we want to leave all of these 1 inch except for the left. So we're going to change the left margin, which is right here. We're going to drag across that 1 and we're going to type in 1.5. You don't have to put the quote mark there for the inches. Just type in 1.5 and click OK. Now, over here you see the 1 inch gray area on the ruler. You see how far the text is from the edge of the page. When I click OK, you see now we have 1.5 inches up here and there's a bigger white space, which allows a binding of some sort to not interfere with the text of the report. So always pay attention to the instructions in your book and to the instructions that your supervisor is giving you if you need to make a left-bound report. Type it up as normal, and then when you're done with it, change the left margin to 1.5 inches.